Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the art of unclenching your soul from yesterday's pain. But wisdom says, do not open the same door that bruised you. Love yourself enough to forgive and still guard your peace. Let them go with grace, but never forget what their absence taught you. Forgiveness is freedom, not permission for repeated pain. It is one of the most misunderstood acts of strength. Many people believe that forgiving someone means welcoming them back into your life as though nothing happened. They think forgiveness is the same as reconciliation, or that it means pretending the wound never existed. But true forgiveness is not about restoring what broke, it's about releasing what burdens your spirit. It is a personal liberation, a quiet revolution inside your soul that says, I choose peace over poison. When someone hurts you deeply, they plant something heavy in your heart. Anger, disappointment, and grief take root, and if left unaddressed, they grow into bitterness. That bitterness does not stay still. It whispers into your days, darkens your joy, and hardens your hope. Forgiveness is the act of pulling that root out. It doesn't mean the soil will look the same again, but it means you refuse to let bitterness make a home where healing should live. Forgiveness is freedom because it unchains you from the person who hurt you. When you hold on to resentment, you stay tied to the very pain you want to escape. Every thought of revenge, every replay of the betrayal keeps you standing in the same moment that wounded you. Forgiveness says, you no longer get to live rent-free in my heart. It is not a gift for them, it is mercy for yourself. You forgive because your peace is more precious than your pride. But freedom does not mean foolishness. Forgiveness does not ask you to be blind, to keep trusting those who have proven unworthy of it. You can forgive someone and still say, you do not have the right to hurt me again. Setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, it is self-respect in motion. When you forgive, you acknowledge the wrong, learn the lesson, and decide what place, if any, that person has in your future. That decision belongs to you, not to guilt or pressure disguised as virtue. There is a certain beauty in forgiving without reopening old doors. It shows that your compassion is vast but not reckless. It proves that you can rise without resentment and love yourself enough to stay safe. Some people mistake your calm for weakness, but forgiveness takes courage that anger will never understand. It takes strength to face pain without turning it into vengeance. It takes wisdom to say, I wish you well, but I walk on without you. Many confuse forgiveness with forgetting, but forgetting is passive. It erases memory. Forgiveness is active. It transforms it. When you forgive, you do not erase what happened. You reframe it. You take the lesson, the clarity, the growth, and you leave the rest behind. You no longer define yourself by how you were hurt, but by how you healed. You begin to see that the scar is proof of your endurance, not your defeat. Forgiveness also teaches balance, the delicate dance between empathy and self-protection. You can understand why someone acted as they did, yet still recognize that their actions are unacceptable. Compassion does not mean consent. You can send peace to someone's path while choosing not to walk beside them again. That is not bitterness, that is wisdom shaped by experience. When you forgive, you reclaim your power. You decide that your joy will not be hostage to anyone's behavior. Forgiveness lets you breathe again, think clearly again, and dream without shadows. It is the quiet strength of the heart that says, I have been hurt, but I am still whole. You learn to love yourself enough to let go, not out of indifference, but out of understanding that peace and pain cannot share the same home. Forgiveness is freedom, not permission for repeated pain. It is saying, I am free, without needing to say, I am blind. Learn the lesson, not the bitterness. Every wound carries a message, and every disappointment arrives as a teacher. Yet too often we let pain turn into poison instead of wisdom. When life hands us heartbreak, betrayal, or failure, we stand at a crossroad. We can learn from what happened, or we can let bitterness take root and rule us. The lesson will lead us forward, but bitterness will keep us bound to the very thing we wish to escape. Pain, by its nature, demands attention. It knocks until you listen. It is easy to get lost in the ache, to replay the wrong over and over, asking why it happened or why it had to happen to you. But the truth is, pain does not exist to punish. It exists to teach. Every broken promise, every unfair ending, every rejection is an invitation to understand yourself more deeply, what you value, what you deserve, and where you need to grow stronger. Learning the lesson means you take the experience, sift through its ashes, and keep the gold, the understanding that will protect and guide you in the future. It means asking yourself, what was this here to show me? Perhaps it came to teach you boundaries, patience, discernment, or the courage to walk away. Lessons are rarely wrapped in kindness, but their purpose is always clarity. Bitterness, however, is what happens when you stay too long in the fire. It's when you let the hurt replay until it defines you. Bitterness whispers that you were wronged and that the world owes you something for your suffering. But bitterness builds walls around your heart, walls that keep out both pain and joy. It feeds on memory and starves your peace. When you choose bitterness, you let the past live in the present, shaping your thoughts, your trust, and even your tenderness. To learn the lesson, you must release the need for revenge or validation. You must stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You must understand that closure is not something others grant you. It is something you create. The lesson often arrives the moment you stop needing to win and start wanting to understand. When you learn, you rise above what tried to diminish you. When you grow, you refuse to let pain have the final word. It is not easy. Learning without bitterness takes humility. It requires looking at your own part, not to blame yourself, but to see where you can choose differently next time. It asks you to soften without surrendering, to forgive without forgetting, to remain open-hearted even when the world has shown its sharp edges. This kind of strength is quiet. It does not shout revenge. It whispers resilience. There is grace in learning. It gives meaning to moments that once only caused suffering. You start to see patterns, how certain choices led to certain outcomes, how ignoring your intuition led to disappointment, how staying too long in a place of disrespect eroded your peace. When you learn, you stop repeating cycles. You stop attracting the same hurt in new disguises because now you recognize it before it reaches your door. Bitterness teaches nothing. It simply repeats the story word for word with no new ending. It traps you in the role of the victim when in truth you were meant to be the survivor, the student, the creator of a wiser version of yourself. Learning, on the other hand, gives you your power back. It says, this happened and I will use it, not be used by it. When you learn the lesson, the pain begins to lose its sting. It becomes a memory, not a wound. You no longer carry the weight of anger, you carry the strength of understanding. Every challenge then becomes a chapter, not a cage. You begin to walk differently, lighter, wiser, more aware. Learn the lesson, not the bitterness, because only one will set you free. The other will keep you chained to what you cannot change. The lesson expands your spirit, the bitterness shrinks it. And life, in all its mystery, is far too beautiful to spend behind the walls that bitterness builds. Boundaries are love-wearing armor. They are not walls meant to shut people out, but shields meant to protect the peace within. To set boundaries is to say, I love myself enough to guard my energy, my time, and my heart. Boundaries are not born from coldness. They rise from clarity. The understanding that love without limits becomes self-neglect. Too often, people confuse boundaries with rejection. They believe that saying no means being unkind, or that protecting your space means you lack compassion. But real love for yourself and for others cannot survive without truth. Boundaries are the language of self-respect. They teach others how to treat you, and they remind you what you deserve. When you draw a line, you are not pushing people away. You are simply defining where peace begins and chaos ends. Every boundary you set tells a story about how much you've learned from your pain. It says, I have been here before. I have given too much, stayed too long, or tolerated too little respect. I will not do it again. Boundaries are the wisdom earned from heartbreak, disappointment, and exhaustion. They are the evidence that you have finally stopped confusing endurance with love. When you love without boundaries, you begin to disappear inside someone else's needs. You silence your truth to keep the peace, but that peace is false. It is built on your silence and their comfort. Boundaries protect the kind of love that allows you to stay whole while caring for others. They make sure you are not giving from an empty cup, not saying yes when your soul is begging for no, not pretending to be okay just to keep someone near. Some people will not understand your boundaries. They will call them distance, arrogance, or even cruelty. But remember, those who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always see them as a threat. The ones who truly love you will honor them, even if they don't always agree, because love, when it is real, seeks not control, but balance. It understands that closeness means nothing without respect. Boundaries are acts of love, not only toward yourself, but toward others. They keep relationships honest. They prevent resentment from building in the shadows. When you express your limits, you give people a chance to meet you with awareness instead of assumption. You say, this is who I am. This is how I need to be treated. That is not harshness. That is truth spoken with grace. It takes courage to build these lines. Many of us were taught to please, to keep quiet, to make ourselves smaller so others could stay comfortable. But there comes a time when you must reclaim your space. You must understand that protecting your peace does not make you selfish. It makes you whole. When you respect yourself, you teach others how to love you better, not through demand, but through example. Boundaries are the armor that keeps your love pure. Without them, your giving becomes sacrifice, your compassion becomes exhaustion, and your kindness becomes a doorway for harm. With them, your love becomes steady, honest, and sustainable. You learn to give without losing yourself. You learn that saying no to what drains you is saying yes to what nourishes you. When you wear the armor of boundaries, you move through life with dignity. You no longer beg to be understood. You live in a way that makes misunderstanding impossible. You know where you stand, and because of that, you can walk in peace. Love without armor will always bruise. Love with boundaries can bloom without fear because it stands protected by self-respect. Boundaries are love-wearing armor, the kind that allows you to open your heart without letting it be broken by carelessness. It is not distance that keeps love alive, but balance. Boundaries make sure that love remains what it was always meant to be: kind, safe, and free. Trust must be earned, not assumed. It is one of the most sacred elements of human connection, invisible yet powerful, fragile yet foundational. Trust is not something we hand over freely just because someone asks for it. It is something that must be built through consistency, honesty, and respect. It is not a gift wrapped in innocence, but a bond forged through time and truth. Too often, people mistake kindness for trust. They believe that because someone smiles warmly, speaks softly, or offers help, they deserve immediate access to the deepest parts of your heart. But trust does not live in words alone. It lives in actions that stand the test of time. It is built in the quiet moments when someone shows up, not just when it is easy, but when it is inconvenient. Trust is earned in the doing, not in the promising. When we assume trust, we open the door too wide, too soon. We give others the privilege of our openness before they have proven they can handle it. That kind of unguarded giving may feel noble, but it often leads to heartbreak, because not everyone has earned the right to know your softness, your secrets, or your soul. Some people come into your life to teach you that intention and integrity are not the same thing. Their words may sound true, but time always reveals who means what they say. Earning trust requires patience from both sides. It means allowing people to reveal themselves gradually through patterns, through choices, through the way they treat others when no one is watching. Real trust does not need to be rushed. It grows quietly, like roots beneath the surface. And when it is genuine, it does not waver with rumor or distance. It stands steady because it was built on truth, not illusion. When you understand that trust must be earned, you begin to protect your peace more carefully. You no longer hand your faith to those who only offer charm. You observe, you listen, you learn. You start to value consistency over charisma, sincerity over sweet talk. You realize that trust is not a favor. It is a responsibility. To be trusted is to be given something sacred. Another person's belief that you will not harm them. That belief should never be taken lightly. People who truly value your trust will treat it as treasure. They will handle your vulnerability with care, not curiosity. They will not take advantage of your openness or use your honesty against you. And when they make mistakes, as all humans do, they will take accountability rather than hide behind excuses. Trust cannot survive where there is denial or deceit. It can only grow in the soil of truth. Trust is also something you owe yourself. You must learn to trust your instincts, that quiet voice that warns or reassures you before logic can explain why. Too often we ignore our intuition, choosing instead to believe the best in others while doubting ourselves. But your inner knowing is your first form of protection. When you learn to trust yourself, you no longer beg others to prove their loyalty. You simply allow time and truth to reveal it. It is not harsh to require that trust be earned. It is healthy. It does not mean living in suspicion. It means living with discernment. You can be open-hearted and still cautious. You can love deeply and still expect accountability. The two are not enemies. They are partners in wisdom. Trust must be earned, not assumed, because what is given too easily can be broken just as easily. Let people show you who they are before you decide who they are to you. Let actions be the measure, not appearances. When trust is earned, it becomes strong enough to endure storms. When it is assumed, it collapses at the first sign of wind. Healing requires both courage and clarity. It is not a gentle path, not a straight one, and never as quick as we wish it to be. Healing asks us to walk into the very places we once tried to escape, to face what we buried, and to name the things we were once too afraid to see. It takes courage to confront pain, but it also takes clarity to understand what that pain is trying to teach us. Without courage, we run from the truth. Without clarity, we get lost in it. Courage is the fire that lights the first step toward healing. It is the quiet decision to face the ache instead of avoiding it. It whispers, "I will not stay broken," even when your voice shakes. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the simple act of getting out of bed after a night of tears, or choosing to forgive yourself when shame tries to drown you. Healing begins when you decide that your peace is worth the discomfort of facing what hurts. But courage alone is not enough. You also need clarity, the ability to see yourself and your pain without distortion. Clarity means looking at your wounds with honesty, not judgment. It is asking hard questions. What really hurt me? What am I still holding on to? What patterns am I repeating? Healing without clarity is like walking through the dark without knowing which way is forward. You may be moving, but you are not progressing. Clarity invites truth to the surface. It shows you that not everything broken was your fault, but not everything that happened was out of your hands either. It helps you take responsibility without taking blame. It teaches you to separate what was done to you from what you can do now. It allows you to see that healing is not about rewriting the past, but about understanding it enough to stop reliving it. Courage gives you the strength to pull the pain out. Clarity helps you understand where to place it once it's in your hands. Together, they transform wounds into wisdom. When you see clearly, you stop calling chaos love. When you act courageously, you stop allowing fear to write your story. Healing asks for both: the bravery to walk through the fire and the vision to know when you've come out the other side. Sometimes clarity arrives slowly. It comes in quiet reflections, in moments when you finally understand why something had to end or why someone had to leave. It comes when you realize that healing isn't about getting back to who you were before the pain, but about becoming someone stronger, wiser, and more whole. Courage gets you to that place. Clarity keeps you there. There will be days when courage feels far away, when you want to retreat into the familiar ache because it feels safer than the unknown of healing. But each time you choose to look inward, to sit with your feelings instead of silencing them, you strengthen the part of you that believes in recovery. And with each act of bravery, clarity follows, like sunlight breaking through fog. Healing is not about pretending the wound never existed. It's about no longer letting it define you. It takes courage to accept that you were hurt and clarity to see that you are more than what hurt you. It takes courage to release what you loved but lost, and clarity to understand that letting go does not mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain, truth over illusion, growth over grief. Healing requires both courage and clarity. The courage to face your shadows, and the clarity to know that even in darkness you are still becoming light. When both meet, the heart learns to breathe again, not as it once did, but deeper, steadier, freer. Rise wiser, not harder. Life will break you in places you never expected, and for a time it may convince you that the only way to survive is to become stone, unfeeling, guarded, untouchable. But strength without wisdom turns to bitterness, and survival without softness becomes another kind of suffering. Rising wiser means carrying the lesson, not the weight. It means growing through the pain, not growing around it. When the world wounds you, your first instinct might be to build walls so high that nothing can reach you again. You tell yourself that you will never be fooled, never be hurt, never be vulnerable. You begin to confuse hardness with safety, but hardness keeps out the good as well as the bad. It numbs joy, dulls connection, and locks you in a prison of your own making. Wiser rising, however, is different. It is the decision to stay open but not unguarded, to see clearly without becoming cold. To rise wiser is to look at what happened and ask, what did this teach me about myself? It's not about revenge or regret, it's about revelation. Pain becomes a teacher when you let it show you the truth, the patterns, the weaknesses, the strength you didn't know you had. Wisdom comes when you stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? Rising wiser means you no longer let pain dictate your purpose. You use it as fuel for understanding, compassion, and better choices. Hardness says, I will never trust again. Wisdom says, I will trust carefully with eyes open. Hardness says, I don't need anyone. Wisdom says, I will choose who deserves my energy. Hardness says, I'll never care again. Wisdom says, I'll care differently with boundaries and balance. The difference between the two is healing. One closes the heart, the other strengthens it. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every betrayal holds a mirror to who you are and who you're becoming. Rising harder means you refuse to look at that reflection. You let anger be the shield that hides your wounds. But rising wiser means you face it. You see where you gave too much, where you ignored your intuition, where you mistook potential for love, and then you promise yourself to do better, not out of fear, but out of respect for your growth. The world does not need more hardened hearts. It needs people who have been broken and still choose to love, still choose to hope, still choose to rise. Wisdom makes your strength gentle and your gentleness strong. It teaches you that forgiveness is not weakness, that boundaries are not cruelty, that moving on does not mean forgetting. When you rise wiser, you become the calm in a storm you once drowned in. Rising harder keeps you in survival mode. Rising wiser moves you into creation. You stop just enduring life and start shaping it. You begin to see that your scars are not signs of failure, but symbols of endurance. They tell the story of how you made it through without losing yourself. They remind you that you can bend without breaking, love without losing, and forgive without forgetting. To rise wiser is to walk through the fire and come out carrying light. It is the art of turning pain into perspective, hurt into humility, and endings into beginnings. It is learning that strength is not about how loudly you roar after being hurt, but how quietly you grow afterward. Wisdom teaches you to meet pain with understanding, to meet change with acceptance, and to meet life with grace. So when life knocks you down, as it surely will, and don't rise harder, hardness only protects you from healing. Rise wiser. Rise with the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself, the kind of peace that cannot be stolen, and the kind of heart that still believes even after it has been broken. In the end, forgiveness, boundaries, trust, healing, and wisdom are all threads in the same fabric of peace. To forgive is to free yourself. To learn is to grow without bitterness. To set boundaries is to love yourself with strength. To trust wisely is to honor discernment. To heal is to reclaim your courage and clarity. And to rise wiser is to become both softer and stronger at once. Life will test your heart, but every lesson is an invitation to return to yourself, calmer, braver, and more whole. Do not let pain harden you. Let it refine you. Rise, not untouched but transformed, glowing with the quiet power of a heart that has learned to love and protect itself at the same time.